Thank you for reading your piece, Matt.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
No worries. So the Tories have totally changed tack and they're going for Corbyn's strengths now, not his weaknesses.
Yeah.
What do you reckon's next?
That's a very good question. I mean, I was very surprised they didn't go for his strengths. Obviously, during the election campaign, it was very much a Linton Crosby tactic to just keep hammering the weaknesses, even though a lot of those things weren't news to people, or they'd been priced in, or they didn't really care about them. I think a lot of people are struggling at the moment, and they want someone to come in and offer something different, and offer an alternative and a plan to improve people's lives. And the Tories, with this relentlessly negative message, aren't really resonating with people at the moment. I think it's they need to come up with, if they're going to stand any chance of challenging Labour next time around, they need to come up with a coherent and extensive programme that is going to convince people that they're equipped to sort everything out. I think you had Nicholas Soames today talking about how they should have a separate cabinet for Brexit and a separate cabinet for domestic issues. And that's because all of these cabinet meetings now are just getting bogged down with Brexit, and all of these, there's so many domestic problems that need to be solved. Housing crisis, NHS crisis, there's inequalities widening. So there's a real risk for them that they get so bogged down in Brexit, it becomes just the centrepiece of everything, that the support for Corbyn will increase exponentially, because these problems are just going to get worse.
And there's a real chance for Corbyn to, as I see it, create a transformative vision that can link those two things together. So if you link the domestic policies or the domestic problems with a Brexit, which is maybe more of a Lexit, to bring that term back, so I don't think it's been used enough, where you have a process whereby leaving the EU allows you to nationalise, allows you to introduce state aid or do procurement differently. So I don't know if that's, do you think that's the way Corbyn's going to go about it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you have to, obviously we're leaving the European Union, that's the starting point. And especially now, most people accept the result of the referendum or voted leave. So the choice is a right-wing Tory Brexit, or it's Labour Brexit, or Lexit, or whatever you want to call it.
Bring it back, Matt. Make it happen.
And you're right. There's people talk about lots of the things in the manifesto would be undeliverable if we came out of the single market, but a lot of the things in the manifesto would be undeliverable if we stayed in the single market, like renationalisation. The single market has a lot of aspects to it which aren't necessarily left-wing, like forced privatisation, rules on state aid. So what we want is obviously a close partnership with Europe and a trading relationship. We don't necessarily want to be in the single market. So so I think those two things can be interlinked, and I think the domestic programme that he's come up with has obviously been very popular, and that was what they sort of achieved after just 2 years. So policy development will keep going on, and obviously there'll be new challenges to solve next time.
I keep thinking about this guy. Did you see it yesterday? He got a Mogmentum tattoo on his chest. And I was like, wait until you see the 2022 manifesto. You're going to want to get some tattoo removal on that. Trust me. But I wonder about this, because I think material conditions really work with young people, because that's what spoke to the manifesto.
Yeah.
But then there was YouGov data out today saying that 61% of Leave voters are okay with Brexit bringing in economic harm to the UK. So it seems like material conditions maybe don't matter to some other Leave voters. And 2 out of 3 Labour MPs represent a Leave constituency. So there's maybe a tension there.
I think there's I think we have to keep in mind what the reasons were that people voted for Brexit, and the primary driver of it was a response to the status quo, the economic status quo, not working for a lot of people, and they saw Brexit as the way of changing it. And the Leave campaign itself was centred on, let's give more money to the NHS. It was very much a kind of left-wing argument that was made, and that's why it was successful, because they picked up a lot of Labour voters, and they needed to do that to win. I think that if you look at the general election in places like Peterborough, where the UKIP candidate stood down, Labour won the seat from the Conservatives. It obviously Jeremy Corbyn attracted a lot of UKIP voters back, and I mean, it's very difficult to say why people are prepared to sacrifice, their jobs or their families' jobs for Brexit. Obviously, sovereignty played a big part, like the ability to make our own laws. I think that's often understated. But I think more work needs to be done, perhaps, on looking into why these people place that above the economic arguments. But a lot of people just want the result to be respected and Brexit to happen now. We've voted for it democratically as a country. I voted Remain, just FYI. But the country's voted for it, and if it's not respected, I think that's quite bad. You can't call a referendum, as David Cameron did, ask the country what they, are we in or out, and they've delivered a result, and then to say, oh, it's not the result we wanted, sorry. There are, I think the implications of that are much worse. So I think that might be why people have answered in that way. But it might be because, lots of their family members, Leave voters, might be in insecure jobs, might not be in very good jobs, and they're hoping that might change if we come out of the European Union. So it's very difficult to say why that is, obviously. But
I totally agree. I really can't bear Ramona's right now. It's like it's happened. Take a deep breath. And let's get imaginative and think about how we can make this work for people. Make it work for people who voted for Leave. Maybe you think that they got duped. Maybe you don't agree with them. But at least, yeah, like you said, go back to why they did and figure out a way to make this work for everyone. And I think that's what a lot of people are getting bogged down with. They just want to return to the status quo when actually maybe we need to think on our feet a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's where a case for keeping the benefits of the single market or the customs union, but having a different deal with the EU. But there are a lot of Ramonas in the Labour Party. I'm not going to name any names. Took a minute, but there are.
Look, I mean, if we don't end up coming out of the European Union, if it's too difficult after 2 years to come to a deal where we protect jobs and living standards, and the scale of the task is too difficult and too complicated, and we're not equipped to do it, and we can't get a transitional deal, and there's lots of moving parts with this, right? Then after that period of negotiation or attempted negotiation, the mood of the British people may have changed, and because it's been shown that it's not possible to deliver what we want to deliver. So by showing the public that it's too difficult and maybe we need to have a rethink, rather than telling them they're wrong, that's a much better way to go. It respects the result. We're now trying to negotiate a departure, but with all these things, the mood of the public can change, but it has to be because they can see that it's they can see for themselves that it's difficult, rather than because someone has told them. And I think that's where, if you upset with the result of the referendum, then the way to get people on your side is not to tell them they're wrong.
It feels like there's almost a fear of democracy sometimes from the Labour Party, and there's this sort of clutching on to power, and I think that comes into play with proposed changes at the NEC level, where some people want to make it easier to select your own MP, or to make local parties more democratic. And there's people in the party who definitely don't want that to happen. And I feel like often they're the same people who are really afraid of the fact that some working class people got to decide the fate of the country. Do you agree that there's maybe that sentiment there?
Perhaps there is, yeah. In some echelons of the Labour Party establishment, I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, there is obviously, you can see the way that they treat Momentum and Momentum activists, and the new membership and the registered supporters. It's like they've never met them. They're just like they try to sort of portray them as being these like sort of strange people that we shouldn't trust, and like a rabble or whatever. But these people are the ones who are actually working very hard to deliver a Labour government. They certainly did in the general election campaign. Momentum were pioneering in their campaigning. They're fantastic, and they should be embraced, and we should want to be a mass membership party. And as I say, like, it's the principle more than anything of respecting the result of the referendum. You can't, as I say, you can't ask the public what they think, and then ignore it. Yeah, so if anyone's going to be angry with anyone, then it should be with David Cameron.
I mean, angry, I don't know. He might have caused the demise of his own party, so I might maybe more of a fan than I ever was, to be honest, Matt. So my last question is about the Labour Party and the sort of the factional warfare. Do you feel like Brexit is going to be used as a bit of a club with which to beat Corbyn, or do you think it is actually just an issue of conscience and there's a lot of MPs who can't bear the thought of leaving the single market and customs union for that in and of itself?
I think the notion that Brexit and the single market is going to be a wedge issue between Jeremy Corbyn and young Labour voters is pie in the sky, because there are so many issues that face young people at the moment. The housing crisis, tuition fees, cost of living, rent, everything is going against them, and it has done for a long time. So the idea that, because we're not going to stay in the single market, the institutional arrangements that arise from Brexit is going to deter young people from voting for the only politician that is standing up for them is ridiculous. So I just don't think it's going to work if that's what their tactic is.
Well, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.